Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Digital Supply Chain Podcast. My name is Tom Raftery, and with me on the show today, I have my special guest, Jared. Jared, welcome to the podcast. Would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey guys, how's it going? Nice to be on the podcast here with Tom. I am I'm a Utah native. I live in Salt Lake City, Utah. So right around this time is when the mountains start to get snow-capped. I'm an avid outdoors person, so Utah is one of the best places to be in the world. It's amazing for hikes. In the winter, you can go skiing. It's the best powder in the world. But I am father of two, and I like to say father of three. Luminous is my third baby. So Luminous is my software company. We are inventory management and supply chain management for the modern e-commerce company. But yeah, that's a little bit about me.
Lovely, lovely. Never been to Utah. You're selling it well, so I must try head out sometime. But tell me a little bit about Luminous and e-commerce. I guess start off with backstory. Why? Why Luminous? Why e-commerce? What made you decide to start this company to do what?
Yeah, sure. My background is in e-commerce and supply chain. So I was CEO of a $20 million a year direct to consumer brand. They're a great representation of the modern e-commerce business and how they evolve and the challenges that they face. And when I was running that company, it was particularly difficult to implement an inventory system. And I noticed a gap in the market where, you know, it's what I call it is like basically between SAP and ShipStation. There's there's a lot of point solutions,
Hmm.
but there's not a go-to all-in-one that feels like it was made for the problems that e-commerce companies run into. It really feels like when you're running a company that size in the e-commerce world, if you have a certain mix of problems, it'll feel like, man, I need to like get Acumatica or NetSuite or SAP, and it's just those platforms are too big for fast growing e-commerce companies. And yeah, that's ultimately why I started Luminous is I believe that a system that can understand the modern e-commerce business better than the big ERPs is going to win in the end because they can purpose build something for the culture in e-commerce, They're a lot more scrappy, a lot less organized. They do everything ad hoc. Whereas NetSuite or SAP, it's built typically for very big organizations, and you have to have a lot of hands running that thing. Whereas Luminous are how we build is, this inventory management. Most systems, you need to have like 6, 7 different roles to be able to keep your inventory accurate. With Luminous, it's like, how can we just have one person run everything from your purchasing to your forecasting to transfers to auto depletions? Like, we build it to be simple and have way less steps so that an e-commerce company can actually upkeep it.
Okay, what is the difference in inventory management between an e-commerce company and any other company in supply chain, in terms of how is it that you can make it so simple for e-commerce companies that it doesn't work for companies that are not in e-commerce?
So there's two things there. First, we have to put e-commerce companies into two buckets. If you use a 3PL to outsource fulfillment, so a third-party logistics service, or if you don't. So let's dive into e-commerce companies that use 3PLs.
Hmm.
So there's a massive issue. Even needing an inventory system if you have a 3PL is actually a massive issue when you grow to say 15, 20, 30 million. It it gets to a point where forecasting is almost impossible because if I can't plug into my 3PL's WMS or inventory system, in other words, pull in their live data so that I can have a live forecast, it becomes really difficult. So most systems on the market, upscale ERPs like NetSuite or SAP, or even mid-market ERPs or inventory management systems, they typically they'll plug into the top WMSs like a Ship Hero or SKU Vault, or like some of the more industry leading inventory solutions. But other than that, they can't pull in your live inventory numbers. And 70% of all e-commerce companies post COVID outsource their fulfillment to a 3PL. So you got to think about that. Of those 70%, more than half are with 3PLs that don't use a common WMS. So more than half of those 70% of e-commerce companies are having trouble pulling in their inventory numbers. They have to manually log in, export, throw it into their forecast. So that's a nightmare. So Luminous, we're able to plug into basically every single WMS in the market. And it's through a partnership that we have with another company, but that's how we can solve that. Now the second bucket, which is an e-commerce company that decides to do in-house fulfillment. I don't know if you've ever been to an e-commerce company in their warehouse. Say they're doing like sub $3 million in revenue.
Sure, I haven't.
It's like the Wild West. It's like the Wild West. There's typically little to no processes, and you got to think about the evolution. That's because, Billy Bob Joe, the founder of this e-commerce company, he just started doing fulfillment out of necessity. So instead of having like SOPs and clear pick and pack processes and rigid rules in place, it's just like, he'll start out ordering inventory, putting it in his garage. He'll print off a shipping label directly from the channels, slap it on and throw it out. Like there's no concept of like pick and pack or like bins so just imagine how that evolves when you become like a $10 million company. A lot of times you have pallet racking, you have bins, but there's typically not there's not a set system on how to organize inventory. And what generally happens, we run into a lot of e-commerce companies who are just keeping track of it on Google Sheets, and they're doing a manual depletion every month. That's inventory for e-commerce right there. If you're in one of those two buckets, that's generally how it looks.
Right. And you're addressing it for the second one, how?
So we address for the second one by what I see all the time. I've seen NetSuite go into companies. I've seen other competitors with big systems go into these e-commerce companies, and a lot of times they're unempathetic to their style of warehouse management. It's basically like, you're wrong, we're right. Our system does it this way because it needs to be done that way. Whereas Luminous takes a different approach. We actually we have the most flexible inventory and fulfillment flow on the market. You can do pick and pack if you want to. We also have a way to not do it. You can do QC verification scans if you want to. You also don't have to. There's a bunch of different settings for that. Like you can print out your shipping label at the beginning of the process or the end of the process. You can still use your OMS like ShipStation if you want to. You also don't have to. So we come into a company and we're like, hey, you're great at what you do. Yes, there are sometimes some standard operating procedures that they need to adopt with an inventory system, but more often than not, we can just put Luminous right on top of their existing processes and their existing systems, and it can work for them.
Okay. And it's obviously web-based, cloud-delivered. Is that the setup?
Correct. Yes, that's right.
So easy to deploy. What kind of deployment time are we talking about?
Yeah, so it depends on the size of the company and how their complexity, how many modules they're going to be utilizing. But right now we're seeing implementation time of between 1 and 3 weeks.
Okay. And what about integration with other platforms? Is that, I mean, you mentioned already the WMSs, but other ERP systems, other TMSs, other systems that are out there? How does that integration all tie together?
Yeah, so how that normally works, the integrations that matter for a system like us are number one, like existing software for e-commerce companies that is used in the warehouse. So a great example of that is it's called an OMS, an order management system.
Hmm.
So ShipStation is like the behemoth. They're massive. So we play very well with order management systems because it's the one thing that e-commerce companies can implement by themselves and effectively use. They're very good at implementing those. So instead of like forcing you to rip and replace, and instead we play really well with OMSs in the market. So like that's ShipStation or ShipKey or a desktop shipper. Other integrations that matter are direct channel integrations. So can Luminous push your inventory numbers to all of your channels? Yes, we can. So that's like Shopify, WooCommerce, BigCommerce, Amazon. Other integrations that matter are other WMSs. If you're an e-commerce company, you will most likely use a 3PL. You'll most likely need to pull in some sort of data from a distribution center that you use. And Luminous can do that. We link up with almost any 3PL in the market, or excuse me, their WMSs.
Okay. And let's talk a bit about growth, because we've seen huge growth in e-commerce, obviously given a kick in the ass by COVID, but even before that it was trending upwards, and since then it's gone, much higher, I gotta think. So if I am an e-commerce company today, starting out, annual sales of 1 million, but I want to get to 100 million in 3 years, can you handle that?
Yes. In fact, this might be backtracking just a little bit, but so in a really interesting trend after COVID was the rise in 3PL usage. So there's a big rise in 3PLs opening in the emergence of COVID.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you can guess why, but it, something really interesting. It left a specific market after COVID, after boom in e-commerce in certain industries. There were certain industries that boomed and basically started their online presence from scratch that could not use a 3PL. And those are the types of companies that are seeing some massive growth right now. So like in the like preservatives, animal products, these industries that historically had no direct consumer presence at all, they boomed during COVID. They can't use a 3PL. Like, so for example, meat companies. We signed on a client called REP Provisions. And so basically they buy and slaughter and cut chicken and beef, and they sell it in like as a subscription box. There's
Well,
tons of brands that popped up like this. So it's a good example of brands that, man, they hit a million fast. Like they boomed and they're well on their way to, the 20, 30, $50 million. And the thing is, if you're a brand like that, who's that complex, you're going to need build materials. You're going to need to plug into your 3PL's WMS. You're going to need a system that handles subscription. You need a system that can forecast build materials and tell you how many cows you need to buy. So all the things I just listed,
mhm.
to your point, like how do you go from 1 to 100 million? You need a complex as F system when you're doing a million in revenue because you're a really complex company that really can't use a 3PL. So you have to have a lot of advanced modules. And you're $1 million company with 3 employees. So you definitely can't afford NetSuite or SAP. And they're definitely not going to understand how to implement you at, a 3-person company. You can't use the 7 different modules and you can't customize things to work. So that's where Luminous, we have a really unique value prop to companies like this where, hey, not only do we understand your specific problems as an e-commerce company, but we have the breadth of features that you need at an affordable cost, and we can actually grow with you. That's how our system was built. And Yeah, that's what I would say is if you're an e-commerce company, there are very specific problems you're running into right now that are keeping you from getting to 50, 60, 80, 90, 100 million. And a lot of it has to do like with aggregating your wholesale and direct to consumer data, being able to forecast that out separately. You start selling big box retail. That's a common trend nowadays for e-commerce companies. They're getting their shine in retail. How do you handle the EDI requirements there?
Hmm.
How can you automate that? Because it becomes really tricky really fast. Plugging into other 3PLs. As basic as this sounds, how do you know you're accurately replenishing all of your distribution points? If when you start doing FBA and when that's really important to you, you cannot go out of stock on FBA. It restarts all of your traction. How much, if you start doing East and West Coast distribution, how do you know what to replenish? So these are the types of things, this is where Luminous shines and helps you start out at 1 million and, grow with you to 50, 100 million.
Okay, and is that your sweet spot? At what point, when I have an e-commerce store, should I consider moving to Luminous? And at what point, when I have a massive e-commerce business, should I consider moving off Luminous onto somebody else?
Yeah, the answer to that is it really depends on the type of business you are. So I actually have a video, I have a piece of content where I go over like business archetypes. So, and it's like, what are your attributes as a business? Are you subscription based? Are you wholesale that does some direct to consumer? Are you, do you do manufacturing and kitting in house? Like all of those questions matter on when you should implement a system of record like Luminous. But the short answer is the sweet spot is probably between $1 million and 5 million. That's when you'll start feeling inventory pain. And it's when I go multi-channel. Okay, instead of just Shopify, I'm now selling on Amazon FBA. I have 2 replenishment points.
Hmm.
I need to aggregate my order data. I need to clean stuff up. Or now I started selling some wholesale, some specialty wholesale. Man, all of a sudden I keep overselling my direct to consumer because when I do a wholesale order, it's not catching that and pushing that to my channel so that I keep overselling and I'm wasting ad spend. That's what it looks like. It's little things like that. Or yeah, or I just got my first big box retail contract. Man, this EDI stuff is really annoying. It's not going into my system. Like it's just this thing happening on the side. That's kind of what symptoms look like. But yeah.
And at the other end,
Oh, what do you mean?
when should I consider moving off onto one of the bigger platforms, the
Oh,
NetSuites,
got it.
SAPs, etc., that you mentioned earlier?
Yeah, yeah, great question. I would say it's moving to a big ERP. There has to be a certain level of complexity you're reaching with financials or with HR, just like in employee docs and information and onboarding. I would say most e-commerce companies don't actually reach that point. Even as even a nine-figure brand can be run super lean nowadays. I mean, the Jolie is a good example. They've exploded, and it's like four dudes and a three. It's so I do have a belief that most e-commerce companies, again, depending on the business attributes, you don't need a big ERP, but the attributes that make it where you might need an ERP is you have a lot of employees. You have like really, maybe you're in like the supplement space where traceability really matters.
Hmm.
Or like even Luminous, we could do lot tracking and we have full traceability, but there's a certain level of traceability that you need as like a supplement company that sometimes you just have to get with SAP. So yeah, I would say like number of employees or complexity of processes, probably a mix of both of those, where it's just like, there are specific things that Luminous can't give me that like my industry needs. That's kind of when I would make that decision.
Okay. What about things like compliance? Because There's new legislation coming up in the EU, for example, the EU deforestry legislation, which is coming online the end of this year, start of 2024. And there's the EU, oh, can I remember the name of it? Supply Chain Due Diligence Act, which,
Hmm.
the Due Diligence Act requires that you make sure that there's no forced labor in your supply chain. The deforestation one requires that you make sure that nothing that you are selling has caused deforestation across 7 categories of goods
Mm,
in where they were sourced in since December 31st, 2020. So, and the penalties for not adhering to these are quite strict, and it's a percentage of global turnover, that kind of thing. So, is again to your point, is that something that you'd need like an SAP for, or is that something that you guys can handle?
that's something that we could handle. The question there is like, can we have traceability in like the purchasing of raw materials and like, from a quotation and supplier and purchasing all the way into like selling the unit? Can we trace that and prove it? Yes, we can. I think where compliance starts where compliance starts to matter a lot is in when you have certain regulations and for example, if you get audited
Hmm.
as a supplement company, you you have to like at every single step in manufacturing, you have to have either a digital signature or a physical signature. And when you get big enough, that stuff really matters. So like those are the types of things where it's like, yeah, Luminous, we're not that deep on the compliance end for manufacturing of supplement companies, you know? Will we one day? Maybe. But that's when it'd be like, you probably just need a more niche ERP that handles that.
Or maybe Luminous goes into a partnership with somebody who supplies that.
True, yeah. Possibly. If we feel the pull hard enough from an industry, we would.
Okay, fair enough. And so, if I am an e-commerce company and I am selling to my local market, that's straightforward enough. But what if I start doing transnational sales? I'm selling into Asia, I'm selling into Africa, selling into the EU, selling into North America. Again, is that there's lots of different cross-border regulations, customs, and
Hmm.
things? Is that something that you can help with?
Hmm. Yeah, so we have a client who sells across like Australia and China and France. And yeah, Luminous, we handle all of their inventory management and their wholesale distribution in those countries. So we have our own B2B portal, like point of sale, that links up with our inventory management system. And it just makes selling through, you know, international points or like really maybe just a bunch of different points in the United States a lot easier.
Cool, cool. What about things like security, particularly data security? Because, every year, every week, there's a new story of a new threat or a new breach. So how are you managing the data that's flowing through your system from being hacked, for want of a better word?
Yeah. So that's more of like a my CTO's conversation right there. But my he's Brendan Beebe, super smart guy. He built a ERP, the number one ERP for the golf space called Fora. Anyways, so he's in charge of all that. I mean, the basics is we have high quality code standards. We house all of our data on AWS, so we're compliant with any security laws, and we make sure that our customers' data is safe.
Okay, fair enough. And I mean, how do you manage then the relationships with clients to make sure that, they're getting the best from your platform?
Yeah, so the best way we do that is it's actually how Luminous scales and our philosophy behind scaling as a system in this market. Most companies, post Web 2.0 that just rebuilt NetSuite in the clouds, they went the route of they basically pushed to like a free trial and expect 80-90% to churn and 10% will stick around. And you might get an account manager hopping on a phone call with you, but it's like 1,000 people will sign up that month for our competitors, and maybe 100 will stay around and use 40% of the system. We're very different. I don't believe in scaling that way. I believe in scaling slowly and intentionally and getting clients who use 100% of the system, or at least the parts that they need, utilizing it 100%. So that's just our philosophy in scaling. Like, we cost more than our competitors. We're double the cost of like a Sin 7, which is a more down market inventory tool. But we give you certainty that it's going to work because we're not trying to blow up, like get onboard 1,000 users this month. No, I don't care. We're growing slowly and meaningfully. I will never sacrifice, you know, real account management for like dollar signs or more users. Never. That's not in the books. So, anytime you ask anybody on Luminous, like, hey, when was the last time your account manager and you talked? Or like, when was the last time he went to the warehouse and like did a count with you? It's like, he'll probably say like within the last week, like yesterday, or no, like 4 days ago, Josh was there. That's the level of service that we give.
Wow. Okay. And with that in mind, then, can you share a customer success story or customer success stories where you seriously impacted a customer's success?
Yeah, so actually a very recent one. We onboarded a company called Renova Worldwide. I met them at a trade show. They had been through the ringer with softwares, and so they had used, I think, like a more down market tool. I can't remember. It was like either SKU Vault or Sin 7. Wasn't working for them. Didn't have some of the features that we were talking about before. So they're like, same conundrum that I was in as a CEO. It's like, I guess we need NetSuite. so so they onboarded NetSuite, as like a 5-person company with a small warehouse. And long story short, it did not go well. It was a botched implementation, and they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars, and it ended up just not working.
Wow.
And this is an example of NetSuite shoving a square peg into a round hole. Like, they're going down market to these e-commerce companies when they really shouldn't be. They don't understand the market. But anyways, that's besides the point. So what happened was we got them after they had churned from NetSuite, and they saw my content on YouTube. So I have a video that's basically, the whole thesis of it is, hey, implementing a big ERP would have killed my e-commerce business, and like, this is why I built Luminous. And so they saw that, really resonated with it, and we were able to implement them for free in about a week and a half. And they're fully on our inventory system now. So, what took NetSuite like a year and $300,000, we did for free and in a week and a half, and they're very happy right now. So that was really cool to, sort of see like all of my theses on the market like come to fruition and really have proof.
Cool. And where to next? What are your plans for Luminous for the next 3, 4, 5, 10 years?
Yeah, so in short, for the next year and a half, we're a company who's all in on content. I really don't like the old school way of scaling and like how our competitors do it, which is just blow out PPC and just go to events. I'm all about content and being loud on social media. Like, if you want to get to know me as a person and my whole team, like, it's all over the internet. Like, you can see my story, you can see what we're about. But in short, the goal is 3 million in ARR by the end of 2024, and 10 million within the next 3.5 years. And I think we are on pace to get there. Ask me in a couple years, but so far, like, that meaningful scaling it's going very well.
Okay. And in terms of functionality?
Functionality, the number one inventory and supply chain tool for e-commerce companies, number one. And I think my goal is that every single module that is utilized, we have reviews that say like, man, so simple, or wow, that was so easy to onboard, or wow, Luminous is the best support ever. Like it just works. We already have a good offering. I think the biggest thing, expansion of our offering, is polishing off existing experiences for the modern e-commerce company and adding in AI. That's a big one, and we're already experimenting with that. So prompt-based forecasting or just prompt-based commands within our system once you get all the data. It's that those are things we're experimenting with right now, but we'll only go to market with that once we have something compelling, like a compelling use case for it.
Cool. Cool. Great. We're coming towards the end of the podcast now, Jared. Is there any question I haven't asked that you wish I had, or any aspect of this we haven't touched on that you think it's important for people to think about?
No, I don't think so. I would say if you're interested at all in inventory management and it, not even like some hard pitch on Luminous, go and watch my content. I post all the time, not even about Luminous. It's just about, how to choose a good inventory system. And that might not be us for somebody. And that's fine. But if you ever need support on like how to choose an inventory system or like understanding the market of supply chain tools better, go and give my content a follow. So yeah.
Perfect. That leads me nicely into my final question, which is if people would like to know more about you or inventory management or any of the topics we discussed on the podcast today, where would you have me direct them?
Yeah, so my YouTube channel is at Jared_Ward, JARED_WARD. LinkedIn, search my name, Jared Ward.
Shoot me across.
Also, I mean,
Shoot me across the links,
you,
Jared, and I'll put them in the show notes for people to find them.
yeah, honestly, the easiest one, joinluminous.com. Joinluminous.com. You can actually find all of my content from there in the Why Us and our media page. Oh, I also have a podcast as well. It's called Ops Unfiltered. So,
Ops,
if you ever like
Ops Unfiltered.
Yep.
Perfect. Great. Superb. Jared.
So yeah.
Thanks a million. Thanks a million for coming on the podcast today.
Yeah, no problem. It was nice meeting with you, Tom.